don't like Meghan Markle because she made it pretty clear to all her friends and people who work for her not to talk to me. So they need money. Whenever they need publicity to stoke their reputation, they'll drop another.
Prince Harry didn't discover the truth in a courtroom or from a headline. He discovered it in silence, the kind of silence that settles after something clicks into place and refuses to move. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a slow, humiliating realization that the woman he defended against the world may have been defending a story that never fully existed. Tom Bower didn't set out to humiliate a prince. He followed paper. He followed math. He followed people who remembered things too clearly for comfort. And what he uncovered wasn't a scandal built on rumor, but a fracture built on dates that refused to line up. At the center of it all was one deceptively simple detail: Meghan Markle's age.
Official biography, but it was difficult to track down anyone who would talk about Meghan in a positive light. Dishing the dirt on the Duchess of Sussex.
For years, the public was told a clean story. Born in 1981, Hollywood actress, late bloomer, 36 years old when she married Prince Harry. Mature, independent, self-made. The narrative worked because it felt neat. It made sense. It fit the image. Until it didn't. Tom Bower began noticing the inconsistencies, not because he was hunting for them, but because they kept appearing where they shouldn't. Interviews where ages didn't match events. Timelines where milestones arrived too early or too late. And most unsettling of all, a father whose memories contradicted the official record.
And a guy named Jeffrey who spoke to me and said, "I can change your image," he said.
Thomas Markle didn't sound like a man airing grievances. He sounded like a man correcting history. He spoke about Meghan's childhood with precision. He remembered when she started acting, when she became serious about Hollywood, when she finished school. And when those memories were placed beside the palace-approved timeline, they simply didn't fit. According to Thomas, moments the world was told happened in Meghan's late teens or early 20s didn't happen then at all. They happened earlier, or later, but not when the official narrative claimed. When pressed, he didn't accuse his daughter of lying. He did something far more damaging. He suggested her birth year had been adjusted. Coming from anyone else, it might have been dismissed. Coming from the man who held her on the day she was born, it landed differently. That single comment became the loose thread Tom Bower couldn't ignore. And then he found the magazine. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't obscure. It had been sitting in archives for decades. The March 1997 issue of 17 magazine, page 90, a feature highlighting young women with ambitions, dreams, and early achievements. Among them, one entry stood out with devastating simplicity. Meghan Markle, age 21. No embellishment, no context, just a number. If Meghan had truly been born in 1981, she would have been 15 years old in 1997. Not 21, not close, 6 full years apart. Too large to be a typo, too precise to be accidental, and most importantly, published at a time when Meghan had no reason to alter her age. She wasn't famous. She wasn't royal adjacent. She was a young woman trying to break into entertainment. Why would a national magazine age her up by 6 years? That question shattered the timeline completely.
That when she confirmed, yes, we're in love, and when she went on to say, look, we will be able to talk about it more in the future, but for right now.
Because once that number exists in print, the math demands answers. If Meghan was 21 in 1997, then her birth year moves to the mid-1970s. That means she wasn't in her mid-30s when she met Prince Harry. She was in her early 40s. That changes everything. Not morally, practically. It changes how the public would have viewed her entrance into the royal family. It changes the young, modern Duchess narrative. It changes expectations around fertility, pregnancy, and health. And it changes the palace's carefully crafted messaging. 2 timelines now existed side by side, one polished, one implied, and Harry, whether he wanted to or not, was standing in the middle of them.
What do you make of this? Why does he do this? What does he think he achieves by it?
Well, and also saying all that work to do in Africa, which he dedicated his life to.
According to sources close to him, Harry first became unsettled when he realized how often questions about Meghan's age were quietly deflected. Not denied, not corrected, redirected. He began replaying conversations in his head, moments where dates didn't quite align, stories that seemed rehearsed but thin. At first, he brushed it off. Everyone smooths edges. Everyone rounds numbers. But then the 17 magazine entry resurfaced publicly. And suddenly, the question wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was arithmetic. If Meghan was older than she claimed, then the story of her life had been subtly restructured, not invented, but edited. And once Harry allowed himself to see that possibility, other things started to feel wrong, like the birth story. In his memoir, Harry described Archie's birth with a softness that bordered on cinematic. Calm lighting, peaceful energy, 2 epidurals, a quick departure, home within 2 hours. At the time, it sounded intimate, protective, romantic. But when medical professionals read it, they didn't feel romance. They felt disbelief.
Clearly a negative text message that William...
Absolutely. What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors. And what I really thought...
Tom Bower wasn't the first to notice, but he was the first to connect it back to the age question. Because if Meghan was older than claimed, she would automatically be categorized as high risk during pregnancy. That classification isn't optional. It dictates protocol, monitoring, discharge timing. And the story Harry told didn't fit that reality. Epidurals aren't administered like refills. Hospitals don't release high-risk mothers hours after delivery. Portland Hospital doesn't operate like a spa when medical oversight is required. And no hospital allows a patient to go from delivery to Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours without violating multiple safety standards. Doctors didn't accuse, they explained. And their explanations didn't match the script. That's when Harry's embarrassment turned inward. Because if the story was wrong, who shaped it? Who approved it? And most importantly, why hadn't he questioned it sooner? The palace didn't clarify. It didn't correct. It didn't adjust. It did what institutions do when timelines are threatened. It stayed quiet. Sources suggest this wasn't negligence. It was strategy. Acknowledging even a minor discrepancy would invite scrutiny of everything else. Age, births, records, succession optics. Once you pull one thread, the garment unravels. And Harry, who left the monarchy to escape secrecy, began to realize he might be living inside one. The shame didn't come from Meghan being older. Age isn't a crime. It came from the possibility that he had defended a narrative without knowing its foundations were unstable. That he had attacked critics, accused media, burned bridges with family, all in service of a version of events that might not have been fully true. And that realization hurt more than any headline ever could. Because once timelines crack, they don't quietly reseal. They wait. They accumulate pressure. They invite comparison. And with Tom Bower continuing to follow the faint lines beneath the ink, one thing became clear. This story wasn't about a number. It was about how carefully a life can be edited before anyone notices. And Prince Harry, for the first time, had to confront the possibility that the woman he thought he knew and the story he told the world might have been written in pencil, hoping no one would ever tilt the page toward the light. Once the doubt took hold, Harry couldn't outrun it. It followed him into quiet rooms, into sleepless nights, into moments that should have felt safe. The realization didn't arrive as anger at first. It arrived as humiliation. The kind that settles in your chest when you realize you defended something you never fully understood. He replayed conversations from the early days. Small comments Meghan had made about her career, the way dates were often framed loosely, events grouped together without specifics. At the time, it felt natural. Hollywood runs on flexible timelines. Age is currency there. Everyone knows that. He had accepted it without question. But royalty doesn't run on flexibility. It runs on records.
On the whole, and whose lives are shrouded in mystery, and they've climbed the greasy...
That was the part no one had prepared him for. When Tom Bower's findings began circulating privately, long before headlines dared touch them, Harry was confronted with something far more unsettling than gossip. He was confronted with documents, old interviews, archived listings, educational timelines that no longer aligned if the 1981 birth year held. And the deeper he looked, the more the pattern emerged. The story hadn't been invented. It had been streamlined. If Meghan had quietly adjusted her age years before she met Harry, it wouldn't have been unusual by Hollywood standards. Many actresses do it early, then let the altered number calcify into truth. But when that altered truth crossed into royal territory, it became something else entirely. Because age in the royal world isn't cosmetic. It affects optics, health narratives, succession questions, and public trust. And Harry began to understand that the palace didn't just inherit Meghan. It inherited her backstory. Sources close to him say the breaking point came during a private briefing. A quiet, almost clinical conversation where advisors laid out the risks. Not accusations, risks. What happens if discrepancies are acknowledged? What happens if they're denied? What happens if evidence surfaces independently? Harry listened, and for the first time, he didn't feel protected. He felt exposed, because if Meghan's age had been adjusted by even a few years, then the pregnancies would inevitably be re-examined. Not emotionally, but medically. High-risk classifications, monitoring protocols, timelines. The very details he had shared so confidently in his memoir now felt fragile, like glass tapped too often. He began to see how carefully worded everything had been. Announcements that avoided specifics, hospital statements that confirmed outcomes, but not processes, language that sounded reassuring while revealing almost nothing. At the time, he'd interpreted it as privacy. Now it felt like containment. And shame crept in. Not shame over loving Meghan, not shame over protecting his family. Shame over certainty, over the way he had spoken so forcefully, so absolutely, as if questioning the narrative was an act of cruelty rather than curiosity. He had framed skepticism as hatred, doubt as malice, and now he wondered whether some of those doubts had been simpler than he allowed himself to admit. The media didn't know this yet, not fully, but the palace did. And Harry sensed the shift immediately. Calls were shorter, conversations more guarded. The tone changed from defensive to cautious. No one wanted to ignite anything, but no one wanted to swear to anything either. Meghan, meanwhile, noticed the distance. At first, she attributed it to stress, public pressure, lingering fallout from interviews and lawsuits. But then she saw the way Harry stopped finishing her sentences, the way he paused before agreeing, the way he reread things instead of signing off immediately. When she asked him what was wrong, he didn't accuse. He asked questions, clarifying questions, about dates, about interviews, about when certain career milestones actually happened. Each question landed heavier than the last, not because they were aggressive, but because they were specific. And specificity is dangerous when a story relies on blur. Meghan answered calmly. She always did. She framed things as misunderstandings, media distortions, harmless adjustments made long before she ever imagined marrying into the royal family. She reminded him that none of it changed who she was, and she wasn't wrong. But Harry wasn't looking for a moral verdict. He was looking for solid ground. The problem was that every answer seemed to soften the timeline further, not confirm it. That night, Harry didn't sleep. He sat alone with papers he never thought he'd read. Old profiles, career summaries, school dates, articles written before Meghan ever mattered to anyone powerful enough to protect her story. And slowly, painfully, the shape of it emerged. Not a lie, a drift. A story nudged year by year until it became permanent. A number repeated often enough that no one questioned it, until someone finally did the math. Tom Bower didn't frame it as scandal. He framed it as consequence. If the age was wrong, everything built atop it required reevaluation. Not condemnation, reevaluation. Harry understood that distinction too late, because by then, the headlines were forming in draft folders. Journalists weren't publishing yet, but they were circling. Legal teams were advising caution. Editors were asking the same question behind closed doors. If this is true, why wasn't it corrected earlier? The palace dreaded that question more than any revelation itself. Harry dreaded something else entirely. The moment his children would grow up and Google their parents. He imagined Archie one day reading conflicting accounts of his birth. Imagined Lilibet encountering debates framed as facts. Imagined them asking why everything felt so complicated when it didn't have to be. And that was where the tears came. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly, alone. Because for the first time, Harry saw how easily love and protection could become a shield that blocked truth. He had spent years accusing institutions of secrecy, only to realize he had helped maintain one of his own. He didn't blame Meghan the way tabloids would. He didn't frame her as a villain. He framed the situation as something far more human and far more tragic. A woman who reshaped her past to survive an industry that punishes aging. A palace that chose containment over correction. A husband who defended a story without checking its seams. And now, all three were trapped inside it. The final humiliation wasn't public exposure. It was the knowledge that had he slowed down, had he asked earlier, had he allowed doubt instead of fury, this might have been resolved quietly years ago. A simple clarification, a small adjustment, a truth acknowledged without spectacle. Instead, the delay had turned curiosity into crisis. When Harry finally spoke publicly weeks later, his tone was different. No fire, no accusation, no grandstanding, just restraint. He spoke about complexity, about how public narratives aren't always built in one moment, but over time. About how people can carry truths that evolve without intending harm. About the danger of certainty. He didn't confirm anything. He didn't deny anything. But he did something more revealing. He stopped insisting. And in that pause, the world heard everything. Tom Bower published his final chapter not as an expose, but as a warning. Not about Meghan specifically, but about image-making itself. About how easily stories harden into identities. About how institutions prefer clean myths to complicated realities. About how time eventually interrogates everything. Prince Harry didn't respond to the book. He didn't need to. Those closest to him say he's changed. Quieter, more reflective, less interested in fighting shadows and more focused on building something solid for his children. The shame didn't destroy him. It humbled him. Because discovering the truth isn't always about uncovering deception. Sometimes it's about realizing how much you wanted a story to be simple, and how dangerous it is when you demand that it be. And once that realization settles, there is no returning to the version of yourself who never asked the question in the first place.